Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. Since AMD's announcement of the RX 9070 and 9070 XT, I think gamers would agree that the PC gaming industry has had a bit of a shot in the arm. And really, it's been an antidote to a lot of the frustrations that many gamers have been feeling regarding the shortages and ridiculous pricing situation that we've seen with Nvidia's RTX 50 launch. And while things are not perhaps perfect with the 9070 cards, as I mentioned in a previous video, I do wish that the 9070 vanilla was around $50 cheaper than what it is, so it would be $500 and $600 respective of the 9070 and 9070 XT. Overall, I think AMD's product positioning is absolutely fantastic if they can hit the performance targets that they provided us during their presentation, which is roughly on par with the RTX 5070 Ti. And that brings us to a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about today. One is stock and availability of the 9070 cards, and the second thing would be the launch, and this is what we're going to start things out with actually, of the 9060 and 9060 XT graphics cards. So yeah, I don't know whether AMD China did an oops, as in they made a mistake and they shouldn't have announced this right now, because as far as I understand anyway, AMD China are the only division that has actually announced this. The European and the US divisions have not announced this stuff yet. Again, if I'm mistaken on that, please correct me in the comments. But it's also possible that they just made a mistake, as in actually this is not correct. But either way, yeah, they've basically said that the 9060 cards are coming soon in the second quarter of 2025. Now, I'm sure that many of you are probably putting your little detective hats on and saying to yourself, well, that's interesting. What's also happening in that same quarter? And of course, I'm sure many of you deduced that yes, this is to counteract the RTX 5060 and 5060 Ti graphics cards from Nvidia, which are rumored to be launching around the same time frame. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the prices of these graphics cards, and the full specifications have not been announced yet of these cards, but most likely it's going to be based on Navi 44 silicon. Now, for those who don't know, I won't go through a whole spiel of the leaks regarding Navi 44, but basically you can think of Navi 44 as being literally half of everything that Navi 48 is. For example, the number of compute units for the highest end configuration of Navi 48 is 64, and you basically cut that by half, so that's 32 for Navi 44. This means that, again, in theory, the die size for Navi 44 should be absolutely minuscule, and this would not only reduce the cost for actually producing the die itself, but things like the cooler can be smaller, because obviously in theory anyway it won't produce as much heat, and also things like power distribution and other bits and bobs can also be cut down. It's going to be very interesting to see what AMD price these at. I suspect, although I don't know, they're going to be hyper aggressive with these cards. It's going to be very interesting to see whether the 9070 vanillas eventually get a price cut or not. But yeah, either way, I want to give courtesy credit to WCCF Tech for this. I'll leave, of course, a link to this in the video description, but this was originally posted by my drivers. And now let's move on to stock and availability, shall we? Because this is perhaps the most important thing. I mentioned in a few videos that, to be honest with you guys, I don't really give a rat's ass at the MSRP as much as I do what the prices are available at retail. If you've been a PC gamer for any length of time, you may recall that sometimes if a card just isn't selling well, they'll do big bundles and games will come with it, or they'll have like discounts, or maybe bundle it with a CPU or something like that. And in other cases, like we've seen with the RTX 50 launch, there are just so few cards available that some retailers will choose to price gouge, or they'll sell it immediately straight to scalpers, or there'll be so few cards available with the MSRP models at launch, and therefore it's basically just the premium GPUs, which obviously have a massive uptick in price versus, again, the MSRP variants. Now, what about AMD? Well, the good news is they've had many cards available at their retailers for quite some time. This is one of the reasons that they postponed the launch. That, plus to work on software and a few other bits and bobs. I also suspect that that means they've got to nail in the pricing a little bit more. Now, speaking about the pre-order demand in China, and I have to say these numbers are a little surprising to me in a couple of ways. First of all, in China, we actually have a breakdown. I want to give credit to Aniko's Hardware. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. But basically, videocards.com have done a nice breakdown in English, so I'm going to use their breakdown. But basically, you can see here the official store from ASUS. We have essentially parity between the 9070 XT and the 9070 Vanilla. The same thing actually could be said for Power Color. In fact, again, there is a small number increase over the 9070 versus the XT. And at XFX, at least according to these numbers, it's essentially 50-50 split. On the other hand, we have cards such as from Sapphire, where it's almost a double on the 9070 XT, and then some models such as ASRock simply are not even listed for the 9070. The breakdown is basically around 300 cards addition on the 9070 XT. This means that the total number of cards is just a smidgen over 1535, at least according to right now, and this is from a Chinese media outlet. Now, again, it is worth noting that obviously this is not necessarily all of the pre-orders, and unfortunately these pre-orders, at least to my knowledge, are not available in the West at this point. It's going to be very interesting to see how the numbers break down for multiple retailers. Again, I really wish that the 9070 was $50 cheaper, but it is what it is. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens though when we start taking into account MSRP, non-MSRP cards. That's going to be the real, I think that's going to be the real test to me. But there is more to this. So first of all, let's talk about PC case gear, shall we? I want to give credit to a couple of people. I won't list their names. Someone actually messaged me this on Facebook, and one of my friends actually. And I also had a viewer as well message me this on X. So thanks to those who did. But basically, PC case gear, to my understanding, they're a pretty big retailer in Australia. And they say AMD unveiled the new RDNA 4 powered RX 9000 series with improved ray tracing and FSR4 technology. Then they give the prices in Australian dollars, mind you. Has AMD got your attention this time? P.S. Stock levels are excellent. Additionally, I was sent this by someone on Facebook. Expected questions, stock levels are excellent. Safe to say the best for a GPU launch ever. Local pricing is not known. Historically, AMD works hard to get the Australian market close to US parity. We're limiting to one per customer. Available models be listed as soon as we're allowed to share, and we'll beef up our servers for launch. All of that said, if the demand and love from the community is high, we may still sell out because, well, gamers go hard. Now, I have to point out, I've messaged a few people. I've try to find out what stock levels are, and I really want to stress, guys, that the thing with stock is it's very difficult to know because regions differ so much. But to my understanding so far, in the US, in parts of EU, I can't say all of the EU, but the UK seems fairly decent. Parts of like Germany seems decent, but I can't say outside of that. And parts of like Asia, for example, China seems fairly decent. Stock seems to be pretty good. Now, that said, stock being pretty good doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to buy the card, because availability being high, but high demand is also a thing. I mean, this is a really obvious thing, but let's just say you've got 10 of an item, but the demand for it sucks, and therefore you've only sold 7 of the 10, well, okay, that's great, but, you know, who cares? On the other hand, if your demand is ridiculously high, and stock is also high, but, you know what, you've got 1,000 stock, but the demand is for like 1,200 or 1,500, then I'm sorry, some people are still going to be like, you know, kind of, well, disappointed. So I don't know, obviously, whether the demand is going to be enough to... the supply is going to be enough to satisfy the demand. It's going to be very interesting also to see what the split is like versus MSRP and non-MSRP cards, because I think that's the critical thing. It's going to be a very interesting launch. I'm going to try to pick one up myself. God knows if I'm about to be successful or not. I guess we'll see. But yeah, I'm also very curious. Let me know in the comments. Just generally speaking, do you go for premium cards? I'm curious to hear your reactions on this one. Do you go with the basic, simplest, cheapest version of that card possible? Or do you tend to go for a premium GPU that has like a factory overclock, maybe beefed up power delivery, and so on and so forth? With that said, guys, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Stay safe. Bye for now.